Hello and welcome to the first Couch Conversation video. I'm on my own today and I am here to talk to you about the FDA's Diversity Action Plans and the new guidance that was released towards the end of June of this year. My big topic that I really want to talk about is do a little bit of a deep dive into the FDA plan, the guidance, have a conversation around, is it actually the game changer that we're hearing everyone talk about? Is it really going to make clinical trials more inclusive? In a nutshell, before I even get into it, I think it has a role to play. There are gaps, obviously, in how it's going to be measured, how it's going to be enforced. But for me, I think we're in the right direction and we're going the right path. One of the core areas of the DAP that I'm quite interested in is the FDA emphasizing around inclusive enrollment. So going back to my point earlier on about inclusion rather than diversity, it's looking at the general population. It's looking at not just race and ethnicity, we're looking at gender, we're looking at socioeconomic status, we can look at education status. So it's broader. But the key here is really around the data that is available. And the US is one of the strongest countries for data in EPI data as well as demographic data. But hopefully what this guidance does is it makes countries or continents like Europe to start to think a bit broader around regulations, GDPR, and how we can actually go about getting EPI as well as demographic data. One of the other key areas around the DAP guidance is the element of robust and data-driven rationale. That is good. So we need to provide those justifications based on prevalence, disease prevalence, and risk factors. And I think that is key across different groups. So for me, I'm always taken back to this research that I came across a couple of years ago in the space of breast cancer. And it showed indications of Japanese women who are born and live in Japan have a lower incidence of breast cancer. However, as soon as they migrate to, say, the US, those incidence rates go exponentially increase. Another thing that I'm really interested in is the comprehensive strategic measures that are talked about in the guidance. You know, what are those measures that we need to be looking at? And I think it's really good that we're sort of starting to look at things like awareness campaigns about clinical trials and efforts to reduce that sort of patient burden, which is really, really important. And it makes the process more accessible, I think, for diverse populations. So I think that's a positive and really exciting. And the other area that I'm really, really excited by in the DAP guidance is the ongoing feedback and adaptation. You know, the FDA promotes early and ongoing engagement. And I think early is the key word here, because I think what sort of trends we're starting to see in the industry is, oh, I've got to do my FDA submission. What's the diversity plan? And it's becoming a little bit like the ICF, slightly copy and paste. And I think that is where my concerns around the DAPs came in for the last year or so. But hopefully this guidance is now going to put some sort of measures in place to ensure that obviously we've got the scientific rationale, we have the data rationale and the strategic measures, but also we're engaging early. By doing that, we're getting that data. If we don't have access to that data, we're ensuring that any clinical trial, phase 3 or pivotal, is beneficial to the general population, as well as those who are living with the disease. And one area that I'm quite excited by is that enhanced transparency, which I do believe will build trust, because fundamentally what we're starting to see in the industry is, as we're developing all these diversity plans and these targets, is that people are sort of the advertising around clinical trials to gain that interest is beginning to look slightly tokenistic industry-wide. And I think having a look at these sort of transparency things will add to the credibility of any sort of communication and awareness around a clinical trial. So one of the things we do here at Couch Health, which is something we have implemented for the last few years, is that co-creation. And I think going into the community, engaging with the community who are impacted by a certain disease, a certain condition, whether that be sickle cell, whether that be prostate cancer, or even heart failure, will add credibility. And there's data and the targets that you're trying to get, you know, should we be including that on study websites or on sponsor websites? And I think these are some of the key areas that I really am impressed with the FDA guidance. And I want to see more of that because I feel like we as an industry need to hold ourselves to account. And the only way we can hold ourselves to account is by ensuring that we're meeting our objectives, that we're engaging early, we have the data, and we're making really, really justifiable decisions on why we're doing what we're doing. Now, there are other areas that I think we could really improve on. So it's not all perfect, but it's a really good step in the right direction. So when I think about areas that could really be improved, it's looking at different populations. So there's no mention of neurodivergent people. There's no mention of sex and gender from the perspective of different gender identities. And that's really important as we're moving forward in our sort of inclusive sort of practices. One area also I'd like to see more being done is in those early phase studies. Why is it just phase 3 and pivotal studies? We should be looking at this from minimum phase 2 onwards, because we really want to know the data. We want to understand the impact of the data, which population it can work on before we make the bigger decisions for phase 3. And I suppose the final thing is monitoring. How are we going to monitor this? And I feel like there needs to be some standardization. How are we going to record things? What is the measure that the FDA are going to be looking for? So these are just some of the things that I really want to start seeing. Maybe that'll be in the next full version. But yeah, I am on the whole very hopeful, very excited for the FDA. And for me personally, being in UK and Europe, I'm hoping that the institutions out here, ABPI, EMA, are starting to look at this guidance. How can we implement this in Europe? Because essentially, there is a diversity issue, there is an inclusion issue, and it's a global issue. So we need to ensure that the rest of the world is keeping pace with the US, which in this particular space is doing very well. So that's it from me. Any queries, any comments, please, you can either DM me, email me, post a comment on wherever this video is. But please, let's continue that discussion. And I look forward to sharing more videos with you.